Welcome back to our pureLIGHT introduction tutorial for the den scene. This is part 2. Now that I've processed those new meshes, I have to bring them into pureLIGHT. To do that, I'm going to use File, Reload Geometry. You can see here they are. I'm going to go Lighting, Start Bake, bake the whole scene. See, it's taking a little longer. That's all 4 cores working on the trim. Now that we've finished one pass here, I'm going to stop it, and I think this is a good time to explain a little bit about how lighting works in pureLIGHT. So it's a bit hard to get your head wrapped around it, but a very important aspect of how pureLIGHT generates lighting is that the light is red from the surface. So it's not a series of photons coming in the window. Instead, it's these texels on the wall basically looking out the window and seeing the sunlight. It's a bit of a backwards concept, but once it makes sense, it's pretty important. So where this is important is that all these meshes are made up of surfaces, and these surfaces have what's called a normal. That means it has a front and a back. So right now this is the front of this wall, and the back is invisible. We can see through it. By default, all the meshes are considered one-sided relative to lighting. This means that the light rays are basically like our camera. So this surface here, it sees out the window, but if we had a mesh behind, it would see through the wall and out the window. Where this makes a difference, for example on this carpet here, if I open up its properties, we can see on sidedness it's set just to front. That's the one-sided behavior. If I set that to both, press apply, and then we start bake, the carpet is actually going to cast a shadow against the floor. On something low res, such as the floor as it is right now, that shadow can actually be kind of inappropriate. We'd actually call that a shadow bleed. I'll show you here as well if I set this to two-sided using a hotkey, and then I rebake the wall. So instead of baking everything, I'm just going to remove the light map on the wall, go lighting, continue. You can see how we have a bit of a dark halo around all the trim. Now perhaps this is something you aesthetically like and it can be used to good effect, but in general that's why we have the option to make meshes one-sided. So I'm going to bring that back to one-sided and one-sided. So theoretically this wall is going to see right through the trim and it's not going to receive an inappropriately blurry dark shadow. So I've removed that. I'm going to just bake its changes. You can see we have no shadow bleed here. I'm going to stop that and continue exporting our pieces. So the next pieces I want to export are going to be these glass pieces. So I'm going to bring that in as LMA coffee table glass. Make sure I have that E. I'm also going to export the glass for our little lamp here. And for this one I'm going to, for now, use LMA lamp glass. Just going to quickly convert those changes. Bring them into pureLIGHT. So this is interesting because if we were to start baking, right now our glass is going to cast a shadow on the floor. In pureLIGHT we can set a few different transparency options, but for the most part, for glass like this, we don't want it casting a shadow, so we're also going to use that sidedness trick. But instead of setting it to two-sided, we're going to set that to none, and that's basically going to make it invisible to lighting. So that means this area here, which is in shadow to that glass, is going to see right through it, out the window, and therefore be in sunlight. Same idea for this little piece here. Basically, we just don't want that glass to cast shadows. Now, even though it's not going to cast a shadow, it's still going to receive lighting. So this is good in that we have a nice light map on our glass, but it's not casting a shadow on the floor. Continuing the export here, I'm going to export these, I'm actually going to break this apart here. Just going to detach that. I'm going to export these nice round shapes as LMA, large phases. And I'm going to export our T-set here, and the small vase is something different. For this, I'm going to use the prefix VL. Now VL means vertex lit. The way vertex lighting works is instead of a light map, which you can think of as an image wrapped around the surface, it actually stores lighting as a color at each vertex. This is perfect for something really small and really dense like this teapot. If you think about it, each vertex is going to receive lighting, and that's probably going to be better off than a light map mapped around it. Also, because you're not dealing with an image that has seams and mapping, that vertex light's going to work perfect on even really complex, tiny, intricate geometry. So in general, we have light maps for things that are big, smooth, and VL for things that are less important lighting or small, tessellated, gnarly, etc. Also going to export this little mesh as VL. and I'm going to export the plants. The reason for the plants is they're dark, they're really tessellated relative to their surface area, and vertex lighting should be perfectly sufficient. To show you what would happen if you exported a larger mesh with vertex light, I'm going to export our couch here as VL couch. So I'm going to convert the changes using open modified files, convert, and again I'm not too worried about resolution at this point, so I'm just going to bring that right away into pureLIGHT. So you can see we now have the new geometry. If I was to go lighting continue bake, it would bake just the new geometry, but then we wouldn't have the shadow of our couch on the floor, etc. Because it's still a small scene, fairly low res, I'm just going to start rebake everything. You can see as it's baking, it's going to actually try and fill in the area in front of our camera first, as it's now working on the large phases behind us. So while it's baking, I'm going to show you a little bit about how this works. You can see we have a nice light map on these curved pieces, but we have these visible seams. That seam has to do with the light map resolution as well as the filter size on such a sharp curve on this object. So I'm just going to take a look at that in pureLIGHT here. So large phases, you can see it's fragmenting it into fairly small pieces. Now pureLIGHT's pretty good at making those seams go away, but we need more resolution to do that. So 128 light map, especially one that's only 2/3 full, isn't sufficient. For this I'm going to try maybe a texture size of 0.5. And you can see here we have larger, cleaner sections. Maybe squeeze a little bit more out of that same one. No. 7.5 is probably it. There you go. Perfect. So I'm just going to stop this, reload the change, and because the shadow's on the wall and I really only care about this phase right now, I'm going to go lighting, continue bake, one sample, and right now it's, as you can see, only baking the vases. So not only do we get far better resolution out of that change, but those seams are effectively invisible. So while the light map for this is still fragmented, the way pureLIGHT filters in 3D space, you'll never actually see that seam on the final image. As for the VL objects, there's no seams to deal with. You can see here how it has little points of lighting and then it interpolates and blurs between the two. Usually with VL lighting you need a few more samples in order to really get a decent idea of what the lighting is going to look like. So I'm just going to select this and then isolate it. So I've basically now enabled lighting on, or disabled lighting on it, and then inverted that with a scene. So right now if I was to bake, it would only bake this T-set. I'm going to continue bake at 16 samples per pass. You can see it's working right here and it's getting nice and smooth fairly quick. So you have some trade-offs with vertex light. You can see this vertex is in the sunlight, it's bright. This one's partially there, this one's not, and you have a fairly sharp seam right on the edge. But in general, for a small object, like you can see, this teapot looks great. Now based on our sun angle, maybe I'd break off this piece, but for just the indirect light on the teapot, that's all we really need. Now especially if you only had a texture on it, vertex light is usually pretty good for a lot of game environments. I'm just going to go lighting, masking, bring everything back, enable baking on all objects. So you can see with our couch here, I'm going to mask it the same. Even if I let that go for a fair bit, we're going to be limited by the resolution and tessellation of the mesh there. So while a little bit more baking gets nice, you can see here these shadows from the pillows are always going to have this weird smear, and depends on what you're doing. If this is a small background piece in a scene you really don't care too much about, perfect, maybe this is all you need. But for tech demo purposes, I'm going to actually apply a light map to this. Now I could go back and re-export that through Max, but in this case I'm just going to change type in pureLIGHT. So I'm going to select that object, just copy, paste that into the search field, and then I'm going to go rename, change type to LMA, which handles the curved surfaces. So it's converting. Here's our couch. It's fairly fragmented, but as I mentioned before, pureLIGHT does a really good job of hiding and blending the scenes. So I'm going to try something, say around 0.5, find optimal. Now this takes a little bit longer because it is a fairly complicated mesh. Maybe 4 directly. That doesn't really matter. I tend to be personally a little bit anal about getting the most out of my light maps, but really the difference between this and the one before is almost negligible. So now I point out that that's a fairly high-res light map for a couch at 1024 by 512, but again it depends what you're trying to do for the scene. In this particular case we're trying to get the best lighting in a very small space so we can afford to put a little more resolution. In a game environment maybe you would want something lower res or even consider going back to VL. So now that I made that change, reload geometry, I'm going to continue bake. Because everything's disabled, it's only going to bake the couch and really it doesn't matter the lighting on the rest of the scene. So you can see here we get these nice smooth dots for the noise as it finishes. And we're still going to get shadows, but you're going to have nice seams and you're no longer limited by the tessellation in the mesh. So while that actually bakes, I'm going to go and export the rest of these pieces here. So how will I approach this? So let's grab this this edge as VL. So VL. The names really don't matter. It's just more for your own benefit than anything. I've already exported the trim. The wood, LMA is probably sufficient. If you really don't know, it's best to default to LMA. Bookshelf wood. Here ends part 2.